They mocked his accent, laughed at his skin, and left him starving on the streets of Birmingham, Alabama. But years later, the same people stood clapping for a billionaire they didn't recognize until he took the stage, said his name, and destroyed everything they had built on his pain. Welcome back to my channel. Before we continue with this powerful story, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who loves inspiring stories. And don't forget to comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Your support helps this channel grow and allows me to keep bringing you emotional stories like this one. Now, let's continue with the story. Sam Adebayo was 17 years old when he first saw Birmingham, Alabama. The bus window was dusty, and the city looked faded through the streaks of rain. Old brick buildings, rusted signs, empty lots, church steeples rising above blocks that seemed to carry a heaviness he could not yet name. He pressed his forehead lightly against the glass and tightened his grip on the worn backpack resting on his lap. Inside that bag was everything he owned. 2 pairs of shirts, 1 pair of shoes wrapped in a black nylon bag, a Bible from his mother, a notebook full of ideas, and a folded photograph of home. In the picture, his mother stood in front of their small house, smiling like she was trying to make the whole world believe everything was going to be all right. Before he left Nigeria, she had held both his hands and said, "Samuel, do not let anybody make you feel small. You may arrive with little, but you are not little." He had nodded like a son who wanted to look brave. But courage is easy in an airport. It is harder when you are alone in a country that does not know your name. The bus hissed to a stop. Sam stepped down into cold air that bit through his shirt immediately. Birmingham was colder than he expected, and the sky hung low and gray, as if even the weather did not feel welcoming. His uncle, Femi, was waiting near the curb in a faded work jacket, one hand tucked into his pocket, the other waving impatiently. "You took too long," his uncle said before even greeting him properly. Sam tried to smile. "Good afternoon, uncle." Femi took the bag from him, weighed it in one hand, then handed it back. "That is all." "Yes, sir." His uncle started walking toward an old sedan parked across the street. "Good. Less load for me." Sam followed quietly. The car smelled like engine oil, old coffee, and stress. Fast food wrappers were crumpled in the back seat. His uncle drove without much conversation, one hand on the wheel, the radio low, his expression fixed somewhere between irritation and exhaustion. Sam kept looking out the window. He had imagined America differently. He had imagined bright streets, tall buildings, movement, confidence. He had imagined opportunity sitting on every corner, like people said back home. But this part of Birmingham felt worn and divided. Some neighborhoods looked polished, peaceful, full of wide porches and clean sidewalks. Others looked abandoned by everyone except those too poor to leave. His uncle finally spoke as they turned into a narrower road lined with aging duplexes. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "This is not the America from movies. Nobody is waiting to help you. You will go to school. You will not bring trouble. And when the time comes, you will work." "Yes, sir." "You speak too softly. Here, if people think you are weak, they will use you." Sam looked down. "Yes, sir." His uncle gave a dry laugh. "That accent of yours too. They will hear you before they see you." The words were not cruel exactly, but they did not comfort him either. The apartment his uncle shared with him was on the upper floor of a tired building with cracked paint and crooked railings. Inside, it was cramped. A small sofa, a narrow kitchenette, one bedroom for his uncle, and a little partitioned space near the dining area where a thin mattress had been laid on the floor for Sam. "This is where you sleep," his uncle said. Do not expect luxury. I'm grateful, Uncle. You should be. That first night, Sam lay awake listening to the heating pipes knock and rattle in the walls. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. A car alarm chirped and stopped. Upstairs, footsteps crossed and recrossed the floor. He stared into the dim room and thought of home. Back in Lagos, nights were noisy in a different way. There had been generators humming, distant music, voices spilling from compounds, life pressing in from all directions. Here, the silence between sounds felt enormous. He reached into his bag, took out the family photograph, and looked at it under the weak yellow light from the hall. His mother, his younger sister, the house, the rust-colored gate, the mango tree near the front. He put the photograph back carefully and whispered a prayer he had repeated many times since leaving home. God, let this suffering mean something. The next week, school began. Jackson Hale High School sat on a broad campus of red brick and steel, its football field larger than Sam's entire former school. Students moved in groups with effortless confidence, laughing loudly, shoulders loose, backpacks slung casually over expensive coats. Sam walked differently, more carefully, like the ground might reject him if he stepped the wrong way. He wore his cleanest shirt, ironed the night before with the small iron his uncle kept beneath the sink. He had studied the map of the school twice. He had memorized his timetable. He had told himself that intelligence translated in every country. He would soon learn that intelligence meant little when people had already decided who you were. His first class was American history. The teacher, a middle-aged woman with sharp glasses and a clipped voice, paused over his name during roll call. Sam, Adebayo. Adebayo, he corrected gently. Adebayo, ma'am. A few students snickered. The teacher blinked once. All right then. Sam. He nodded and sat still. 3 seats behind him, someone whispered loudly enough to be heard. Man, what did he just say? Another voice answered. Bro came with the deluxe accent. Laughter. Sam kept his eyes on the front. At lunch, he stood alone with a tray, searching for an empty seat. Conversations rose and fell around him. No one called him over. No one moved to make space. Finally, he sat near the end of a table where 3 boys were talking over each other. One of them stopped and stared at him. He was blond, broad-shouldered, clean-cut, with the easy arrogance of someone who had never been told no in his life. This was Preston Hale. His father's name was on the football field entrance, on the auditorium wall, on scholarship plaques in the main corridor. Old Birmingham money. Local influence. The kind of family that was treated like weather. Always present, never questioned. Preston leaned back in his chair and looked Sam up and down. You lost, he asked. Sam answered carefully. There was an empty seat. One boy beside Preston laughed under his breath. Preston tilted his head. I know you can talk. Say something again. Sam said nothing. No, seriously, Preston went on. Say my name. I want to hear how it sounds in wherever. The table erupted. Sam gripped his fork but kept his face calm. Another boy asked, Yo, you from Wakanda or something? Idiot, Preston said, smirking. He's probably from one of those places where people chase goats to school. More laughter. Sam stood with his tray. I will sit somewhere else. But Preston was not finished. Hey, he called after him. Do you even understand English, or just subtitles? The laughter followed Sam across the cafeteria like thrown stones. That afternoon, in biology, he tried to answer a question about cellular respiration. He knew the answer better than anyone in the room. He had studied ahead. He raised his hand, spoke clearly, and before he finished the second sentence, someone behind him imitated his accent in a grotesque parody. The class laughed again. The teacher did not discipline anyone. She simply said, "Let's keep moving." That was the moment Sam understood the rules. This was not just teasing. It was permission. Permission to reduce him. Permission to mock him. Permission to act as if his humiliation was ordinary. The bullying settled into a rhythm quickly. Preston Hale never shoved him in hallways or punched him in locker rooms. He was smarter than that. He preferred something cleaner. Public embarrassment. Quiet sabotage. Social punishment. The kind of cruelty adults could pretend not to notice. When Sam spoke in class, Preston would repeat the last few words in a fake accent until people laughed. When group projects were assigned, Preston would say, "Don't put the foreign kid on slides. Nobody will understand the presentation." In the hallway, he brushed past Sam and muttered words like charity case, refugee, jungle boy, and bootleg African prince. Once, someone taped a printed picture of a monkey inside Sam's locker. Another time, his lunch disappeared after gym, and when he looked around, Preston raised Sam's lunchbox from another table like a trophy. "Thought this was the lost and found for safari gear," he said. Everyone around him laughed. Sam took it without speaking. He learned that silence was not dignity to people like Preston. It was entertainment. At home, things were not much better. His uncle worked long shifts at a warehouse and came home angrier every week. Bills piled up. Rent notices appeared under the door. The refrigerator was rarely full. If Sam took an extra egg, his uncle noticed. If he left a light on, his uncle complained. If he asked too many questions about getting a part-time job, his uncle snapped that he should focus on not embarrassing the household first. "You think money falls from sky here?" Femi barked one evening. "You just arrived and already eat like a man who pays bills." Sam lowered his head. "Sorry, uncle. Sorry does not buy anything." At school, the humiliation grew. At home, the tension hardened. But every night, Sam studied. He read textbooks twice. He borrowed library books about computers, business founders, and American markets. He filled his notebook with ideas. Small app concepts, delivery systems, payment tools, scheduling software for small businesses. He did not yet know exactly what path would save him. He only knew he needed one. His mother called every Sunday using unstable internet and borrowed airtime. "My son, how is school?" "It is fine, Mama." "You have eaten?" "Yes, Mama." "You sound tired." "Just studies." He never told her about the locker, or the laughter, or how often he went to bed hungry so his uncle would not complain about groceries. She would have heard the truth in 1 second and blamed herself for letting him go. So Sam kept giving her edited hope. One Friday evening, after a long week of humiliation, the school announced a student innovation contest sponsored by local business leaders. Students were invited to pitch a solution to a real-world problem in their communities. The winners would receive mentorship, local press coverage, and scholarship money. For the first time since arriving in Birmingham, something in Sam lit up. This, he understood. Ideas were home to him. For 3 nights, he worked on a concept for a low-cost digital tool that could help small neighborhood stores manage inventory, mobile payments, and customer reminders without expensive infrastructure. He thought of small shop owners back home. He thought of immigrant families trying to survive. He thought of people overlooked by big systems. When he finally submitted his preliminary concept, he felt something rare: pride. The following Tuesday, selected students were asked to present draft ideas before a faculty panel and a few invited sponsors. Sam wore the same ironed shirt again. He stood at the front with trembling hands and began to speak. The first minute went well. He explained the problem. He explained the gap in affordable systems. He explained how simple software could help struggling businesses track stock and cash flow. Then, halfway through, The projector behind him flashed to a new screen. It was not his slide. It was a photograph. A zoomed-in, badly edited image of Sam's face pasted onto a cartoon body in ragged clothes, holding a spear beside the words. From the jungle to Java. The room exploded with laughter. Actual adult laughter. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to burn. Sam froze. His throat closed. His ears rang. He could not move. In the back row, Preston sat leaning into his chair, grinning. His friends bent over in laughter around him. A teacher rushed to switch the slide, but the damage was done. The panel tried to recover. One of the sponsors cleared his throat and said, "Why don't we continue when everyone is more composed?" More composed, as though Sam had disrupted the room, as though his pain was an inconvenience. He gathered his paper with shaking fingers and walked off the stage to scattered murmurs and a few embarrassed looks that offered no real comfort. Outside the building, he stood near the side wall under the gray afternoon sky and let the cold air hit his face. He had promised himself he would not cry. Not here. Not where anyone could see. But humiliation has a weight, and that day it crushed straight through him. He bent forward slightly, breathing hard, his hands clenched at his sides. A few minutes later, he heard the auditorium door open. Footsteps. He turned, hoping maybe a teacher had come to apologize. It was Preston. Preston strolled over with both hands in his jacket pockets, smiling like he had just won a game. "You should have seen your face," he said. Sam stared at him in silence. Preston shrugged. "Relax. It was a joke. You did that." Preston smiled wider. "Can you prove it?" Sam's voice came out low. "Why?" That seemed to amuse Preston more than anything else. "Because you walk around like you're smarter than everybody. Because teachers keep acting like you're some inspiring little story. Because this is Birmingham, man. People like you show up and think you belong everywhere immediately." Sam swallowed hard. Preston stepped closer. "You don't," he said. "And the faster you learn that, the easier this place will be for you." Then he walked away. That evening, Sam got home late. His uncle was already angry. "Where were you?" Femi demanded the moment Sam entered. "At school." "You are lying. School ended hours ago." "There was a presentation." "A presentation?" his uncle snapped. "And presentation will pay rent." Sam's chest was still tight from the day. "I'm sorry." His uncle pointed toward the table, where a folded paper sat beside an overdue bill. "What is this?" Sam picked it up. It was a notice from the school about missed lunch balance payments and administrative fees. His uncle's face darkened. "So now I must pay for your food too?" "I did not know." "You did not know. You did not know," Femi shouted. "What do you know? Since you came here, everything is expense. You eat. You use power. You need transport. You bring school problems." "I am trying." "Trying?" his uncle barked. "Try faster." The room fell into a hard silence. Sam stood there, tired, hungry, and humiliated beyond what he could hold. He wanted, for one reckless second, to shout back, to say he had not asked for this cruelty, to say he was not a burden, just unlucky, to say he was drowning. But he said nothing, because poor people living on the edge often do not fight with words. They fight with endurance. That night, Sam opened his notebook and looked at the pages full of ideas. Business models, sketches, code concepts, tiny plans for a bigger future. The lines blurred in front of him. Then slowly, he turned to a clean page and wrote one sentence. "One day, nobody will laugh while I am speaking." He underlined it once, then twice. Outside, the Birmingham night pressed against the window. Inside, in a cramped room where no one saw value in him yet, a broken, hungry immigrant boy made a promise that would one day shake an entire city. But before the world would know his name, it would first watch him lose nearly everything. And the worst night of his life was now much closer than he realized. The first night Sam Adebayo slept outside, it wasn't supposed to happen. It started with something small. It always does. A missing payment. A bad day at work. A man already stretched too thin finally snapping under pressure. Sam walked into the apartment that evening carrying nothing but his backpack and the quiet exhaustion of someone who had endured too much in a single day. His presentation humiliation still echoed in his head. Preston's voice. The laughter. The slide. He had hoped, foolishly, that home would at least be quiet. Instead, the air inside felt sharp. His uncle was pacing. Bills were spread across the table like accusations. A red notice sat open, its bold lettering impossible to ignore. "Where have you been?" Femi asked, not looking up. "At school," Sam replied. "School finished hours ago." Sam hesitated. He didn't want to explain. "There was something I had to do." Femi turned slowly. "Something?" "Yes, sir." Femi's eyes hardened. "You think I am stupid?" "No, sir." "Then don't speak like I am." The tension thickened. Sam set his bag down gently. "I'm sorry." But apologies were no longer enough. Femi grabbed the paper from the table and held it up. "You see this? Rent overdue. Again. You see this?" He pointed to another. "Electricity warning. You see this one?" He slapped down a third. "School asking for money." Sam swallowed. "I can get a job." Femi laughed, short, bitter. "Get a job? You? With that accent? Doing what?" "Teaching Americans how to pronounce your name." The words hit harder than they should have. "I will try," Sam said quietly. "I don't need try," Femi snapped. "I need help." Silence followed. Heavy, unforgiving. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "I did not bring you here to suffer with me," Femi said. "You are becoming a burden." Sam felt something collapse inside his chest. "I can do better," he said quickly. "Give me time." "I don't have time," Femi shouted. The room seemed to shrink. "I don't have money. I don't have space. And I don't have strength to carry another person who cannot stand on his own." Sam's voice trembled. "I am standing." "No," Femi said coldly. "You are leaning." That was the moment. The point where frustration became decision. Femi walked to the door and opened it. "You will leave tonight." Sam didn't move. "Uncle," I said, "leave. Please. I have nowhere to go. That is not my problem anymore." The words landed like final judgment. Sam stood frozen, searching his uncle's face for something, anything soft. But there was nothing there. Just a man crushed by his own struggles, now choosing survival over compassion. "Take your things," Femi said. Sam picked up his backpack slowly. Each movement felt unreal, as though he were watching someone else's life collapse. He stepped toward the door, paused, turned once more. "Thank you for everything," he said, because he did not know what else to say. Femi didn't respond. The door closed behind him with a sound that echoed longer than it should have. The cold hit immediately. It was different now, not just uncomfortable. Final. Sam stood outside the building for a long moment, staring at the door as if it might open again. It didn't. He walked. At first, without direction. Streetlights flickered on one by one as evening settled. Cars passed. People moved. Life continued, indifferent to the fact that a 17-year-old boy had just lost the only place he could sleep. He checked his pocket. $3. That was all. He thought about calling someone. But who? He thought about going back to school. But it was closed. He thought about knocking again. But pride, and something deeper than pride, stopped him. So he kept walking. That night, he found himself behind a gas station. The air smelled of fuel and stale food. A dumpster sat near the wall, its lid slightly open. He leaned against the cold brick and slid down until he was sitting on the ground. For the first time since arriving in America, Sam allowed himself to feel everything. The humiliation, the hunger, the loneliness, the anger. Tears came silently. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. He wiped them quickly, looking around even though no one was there. Crying felt like failure, and failure felt like confirmation of everything they already believed about him. Hours passed. The city quieted. The temperature dropped further. Sam pulled his thin jacket tighter around himself, but it did little. Sleep came in fragments. 10 minutes, then waking, then another 10. Each time he opened his eyes, he half expected to see his uncle standing over him, telling him to come back inside. But each time, there was only darkness. The second day was worse. Hunger sharpened. He tried to stretch the $3. Bought the cheapest thing he could find, a small packet of crackers and a bottle of water. It lasted less than an hour. By afternoon, his stomach ached. By evening, it burned. He walked into a convenience store, staring at shelves he couldn't afford. The cashier watched him closely. Suspicious. Sam left without buying anything. Outside, he sat on the curb and lowered his head. He had never been this hungry before. Not even back home. Because back home, there had always been someone. Here, there was no one. On the third night, desperation pushed him further than pride could hold him back. He returned to the gas station, looked around, waited, then slowly opened the dumpster lid. The smell hit immediately. Rotten, heavy, but hunger overpowered disgust. He reached in, found a half-wrapped sandwich. Cold, slightly crushed. He stared at it for a long moment, then closed his eyes and took a bite. That was the moment something changed. Not just survival, transformation. Because when a person crosses that line, when dignity is stripped down to its barest form, something either breaks forever or hardens into something unrecognizable. Sam did not break, but something inside him went quiet. Very quiet. Days turned into a blur. He learned which places had security cameras, which alleys were safer, which public restrooms stayed open late. He stopped going to school, not because he didn't want to learn, but because survival demanded more immediate attention than education ever could. And somewhere in Birmingham, Preston Hale went on with his life, laughing, winning, forgetting. Then came the night that would change everything. It was colder than usual, the kind of cold that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. Sam sat outside a closed library, his back against the wall, his hands tucked under his arms for warmth. He was shaking, not violently, but enough. Enough to remind him that his body was reaching its limit. He looked up at the building. Dark, locked, untouchable. Inside those walls were books, knowledge, warmth, everything he needed but couldn't access. He lowered his head again, and for the first time since being thrown out, a dangerous thought crossed his mind. What if this is it? What if this is how it ends? Not with failure, but with disappearance. A quiet fading into nothing. No one noticing. No one remembering. The thought lingered longer than it should have. Then, a sound. Keys. Metal against metal. Sam looked up. A man stood at the side entrance of the library. Older. Worn. Dressed in a janitor's uniform. He had been watching. For how long? Sam didn't know. The man stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. "You been here long?" he asked. Sam hesitated, then nodded. The man studied him for a moment. Not with suspicion. Not with pity. With recognition. Like he understood something without needing it explained. "You hungry?" the man asked. Sam swallowed. "Yes." The man reached into his pocket, pulled out a small paper bag, and handed it to him. Inside was a sandwich. Fresh. Warm. Sam stared at it like it wasn't real. Eat, the man said. Sam didn't hesitate. He ate quickly, almost too quickly, stopping only to breathe. The man watched silently. Then, after a moment, he did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket again, pulled out a small set of keys, and held them out. Sam looked at him, confused. The man spoke quietly. "Library closes at 9, he said, "but I clean until midnight." Sam didn't move. The man placed the keys in his hand. "Side door," he added. "Don't wander. Don't get caught." Sam's heart began to race. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. The man shrugged slightly. "Because someone helped me once." Then he turned and walked back toward the door, leaving Sam alone, holding a key, standing at the edge of something he did not yet understand. That night, Sam Adebayo stepped into the library for the first time not as a student, but as a survivor, and without realizing it, he had just stepped into the place where everything would begin. The first time Sam Adebayo stepped inside the library after hours, it didn't feel real. The air was warmer, still, protected. It smelled like paper, wood, and something else he hadn't felt in days: safety. He closed the side door carefully behind him, his hand still gripping the small set of keys like they might disappear if he let go too quickly. For a moment, he just stood there, listening. The building was quiet, but not empty. Somewhere deeper inside, he could hear the faint sound of movement. A mop bucket rolling, water sloshing, the rhythm of someone working. The janitor. Sam moved slowly, every step cautious, every sound measured. He had never broken into anything in his life. Even though this wasn't exactly breaking in, his body didn't know the difference. His heart beat faster with every step deeper into the building. He found a corner table near a row of computers. Old machines, but working. That was enough. He sat down carefully, as if the chair might reject him. For a few seconds, he just stared at the screen. Then he turned it on. The glow lit his face, and something inside him shifted. Because this wasn't just a computer. It was access. That night, Sam didn't sleep. Not really. He explored. At first, slowly, opening folders, reading articles, searching simple things. But within an hour, the old rhythm came back. The one he had before Birmingham. Curiosity, focus, hunger, but not for food. For understanding. He searched for programming tutorials, watched videos, took notes, rewrote examples in his notebook. Tried, failed, tried again. Time moved differently in that room. Hours passed like minutes. At some point, he didn't even notice the janitor standing behind him. "You learn fast," the man said. Sam turned sharply, startled. "I'm sorry, I didn't." "You're not doing anything wrong," the man said calmly. "Sit." Sam hesitated, then nodded. The janitor stepped closer. Up close, he looked older than Sam had first thought. Late 60s, maybe early 70s. His hair was gray, his face lined, but his eyes were sharp, alert, observing everything. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sam," he replied. "Sam Adebayo." The man nodded slowly. "I'm Walter." There was a pause. Walter glanced at the screen. "You know what you're looking at?" Sam nodded. "Yes, I've studied some of this before." Walter tilted his head slightly. "Where?" "Back home." Walter didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "Show me." Sam hesitated for only a second before turning back to the screen. He pulled up a simple script he had been working through. Explain what it did, where it failed, how he was trying to fix it. Walter listened, really listened. Not like teachers who were waiting to move on. Not like students who were waiting to laugh. He listened like the answer mattered. When Sam finished, Walter nodded once. "You're not just learning," he said. "You're thinking." Sam looked down. I try. Walter leaned against the desk. Were you sleeping? The question was direct. No judgment. No pity. Sam hesitated, then answered honestly. Outside. Walter didn't look surprised. Just tired. Tough place to be, he said quietly. Sam didn't respond. Because there was nothing to say. Walter reached into his pocket and pulled out another sandwich, placing it on the table. You come here at night, he said. You keep quiet. You clean up after yourself. Sam looked up. Thank you. Walter held his gaze for a moment longer, then added something that didn't make sense at the time. Don't waste this. From that night on, the library became Sam's world. By day, he stayed invisible, avoiding places where he might be recognized, avoiding school, avoiding questions he didn't have answers for. By night, he came alive. He studied everything: programming, business systems, financial models, supply chains, payment infrastructures. He wasn't just learning random things. He was connecting them, building patterns, understanding how systems worked, and more importantly, where they failed. Walter watched. Not constantly, not obviously, but enough. Some nights, he would sit nearby, reading an old book or reviewing something on paper while Sam worked. Other nights, he would disappear entirely, leaving Sam alone with silence and opportunity. And slowly, a strange routine formed between them. Walter would ask questions, simple ones, but sharp. If you were building something, who would it serve first? What problem is worth solving if nobody notices you solving it? Why do small businesses fail when the owners work harder than anyone else? Sam answered each one carefully, not always correctly, but thoughtfully. Walter never corrected him directly. He just asked better questions. One night, weeks later, Walter sat across from Sam and said, "Tell me what you would build." Sam froze. The question felt different. He had ideas, many, but saying them out loud made them real. And real things could be taken or broken. Walter noticed the hesitation. If you don't say it, he said, it stays in your head. And ideas that stay in your head die there. Sam exhaled slowly, then began. I would build something for small businesses, he said. Simple, affordable, something they can actually use. Walter nodded. What kind of something? A system, Sam continued. Inventory, payments, customer tracking, but not expensive like the big ones. Something designed for people who don't have much. Walter's eyes narrowed slightly. Why them? Sam didn't hesitate. Because nobody builds for them. Silence followed. Then Walter leaned back. Good answer. Sam looked down at his notebook. There's more, he said. Walter gestured. Go on. Sam turned a few pages and showed him sketches. Basic diagrams. Flow ideas. Connections between systems. Nothing polished, but clear. Intentional. Walter studied the pages longer this time. Then, quietly, he asked, Where did you learn to think like this? Sam shrugged slightly. I had time. Back home. Walter nodded slowly, then said something that would stay with Sam long after that night. People think success starts when someone gives you a chance, he said. That's not true. It starts when you see something others don't, and refuse to ignore it. Sam absorbed the words, didn't fully understand them yet, but felt their weight. What Sam didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Walter was not just a janitor, and that the questions he asked were not random. Because years ago, Walter had been something else entirely. Something powerful. Something connected to a world Sam had not yet stepped into. And the ideas Sam was sketching in that quiet library were not as far from that world as they seemed. Meanwhile, across Birmingham, Preston Hale was beginning to step into his own future. Internships, connections, rooms filled with people who knew his last name before they knew his work. And in one of those rooms, something was discussed. Something about small business systems. Something about emerging markets. Something about opportunity. An idea, not fully formed, not yet claimed, but floating, waiting. Back in the library, Sam closed his notebook that night and looked at the screen one last time before logging off. For the first time since everything fell apart, he felt something stronger than survival. Direction. He didn't have money. He didn't have status. He didn't even have a home. But he had something more dangerous than all of that combined. He had clarity. And clarity, when paired with hunger, becomes unstoppable. As Sam stepped out into the cold that night, the key still in his pocket, he didn't realize it yet. But he had already started building the very thing that would one day be stolen from him. And when that truth finally surfaced, it wouldn't just embarrass the people who wronged him. It would destroy them. The nights stopped feeling like nights. To Sam Adebayo, they became something else entirely. They became opportunity. By the time the city of Birmingham went quiet, Sam's real day was just beginning. At exactly 9:12 p.m., like clockwork, Walter would push open the side door of the library with a tired shoulder, dragging a gray trash bin behind him. He never looked around, never called out, never acknowledged anything unusual. But Sam knew. That was the signal. Across the street, sitting on a broken concrete bench near a dim bus stop, Sam would slowly rise. He had learned not to rush, not to draw attention. He moved like someone who had mastered being overlooked. Because in his world now, being seen was a risk. He crossed the street with his head slightly lowered, hands tucked into his jacket. The cold still bit through the fabric, but he had stopped reacting to it. Pain had become background noise. He slipped into the library just before the door clicked shut again. And just like that, the outside world disappeared. Inside, the silence felt different. Not empty, not lonely, but full of something waiting. Sam didn't waste time anymore. He moved with intention. Every night followed a structure he had created for himself, a system within chaos. The first hour was for learning. The second hour was for building. The third hour was for improving. The last hour was for thinking. Not dreaming. Thinking. There was a difference. He sat at the same computer every night. Second row. Third seat from the wall. Old machine. Slow processor. But reliable. And reliability, Sam had learned, was more valuable than speed. At first, his hands would tremble slightly when he started typing. Not from fear. From hunger. Not for food anymore. But for progress. He stopped watching random tutorials. Now, everything had direction. He began mapping out problems. Real problems. The kind that didn't exist in classrooms, but existed in the lives of people like his mother. People like the small shop owners he grew up around. People who worked harder than anyone, but still struggled. One night, as he stared at a blank document, Sam asked himself a question that would change everything. What would actually help them? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes and remembered. He remembered the small shop near his house back home. The owner, Mr. Okoye, who kept records in a worn notebook. Every sale, every expense, written by hand, sometimes wrong, often incomplete. He remembered the frustration, the guesswork, the losses. Sam opened his eyes and began to type. At first, it was simple, a system that could track inventory. What came in, what went out, what was running low. Then he added more. A way to track payments. Cash, digital, delayed. Then more. Customer behavior, repeat buyers, spending patterns. He wasn't just building software. He was building understanding. Walter noticed the shift. One night, he stood behind Sam longer than usual, watching, not interrupting. "You're not just learning anymore," Walter said finally. Sam didn't turn. "I can't afford to just learn," he replied. Walter nodded slowly. Good, he said, because learning without application is just delay. Sam paused his typing, looked at the screen, then asked, Do you think this could work? Walter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled a chair and sat beside him. Explain it to me, he said. And Sam did. Not like a student trying to impress a teacher, but like someone explaining something that mattered. He walked through the system, the logic, the simplicity, the accessibility. Walter listened, really listened. When Sam finished, there was silence. Then Walter asked one question. Who is this for? Sam frowned slightly. I told you, small businesses. Walter shook his head. No, not what they are. Who they are. Sam hesitated, then said quietly, People nobody builds for. Walter leaned back. For the first time, he smiled. Good, he said. Now you're building something real. That night, something changed again. Walter didn't just observe anymore. He started guiding, not by giving answers, but by asking better questions. If your system fails, what happens to the business using it? If it grows, can your system grow with it? If someone tries to copy it, what makes yours better? Each question forced Sam deeper, beyond surface-level thinking, into structure, into strategy, and slowly, Sam began to see something he hadn't before. This wasn't just about helping people. This was power. The power to build something valuable. The power to solve problems others ignored. The power to create something that mattered. But with power came something else. Risk. One night, Sam sat staring at his notebook. Pages filled with diagrams, connections, ideas. Everything he had built so far was there. He ran his fingers over the pages slowly, then looked around the library. Quiet, safe, unwatched. Or so it seemed. What if someone takes this? He asked suddenly. Walter, standing across the room, didn't react immediately. Instead, he walked over slowly, looked at the notebook, then at Sam. Someone will, he said. Sam froze. What? Walter's voice remained calm. If it's valuable, someone will try to take it. Sam's chest tightened. Then what's the point? Walter leaned closer. The point is not to build something that can't be taken, he said. The point is to become someone it can't be taken from. That hit differently. Sam sat back, thinking. Walter tapped the notebook. This, he said, this is not your advantage. Sam frowned. It's everything I have. Walter shook his head. No, he said. You are. Silence. Walter continued. They can copy this, steal this, recreate this. He pointed at Sam. But they can't copy how you think. That was the moment. The shift. Sam closed the notebook slowly, then turned back to the computer. From that night on, he stopped treating his ideas like something fragile. He treated them like something evolving. He didn't just write systems anymore. He built layers. Complexity hidden beneath simplicity. He created logic that adapted. Structures that improved over time. Things that couldn't be easily understood by someone who didn't build them. He stopped thinking like a student and started thinking like someone preparing for a world that would try to take from him. Outside, Birmingham continued as usual. People lived, worked, laughed, and somewhere in that same city, Preston Hale moved forward in his own life. Confident, connected, surrounded by opportunity, unaware that just a few miles away, in a quiet library after hours, the boy he once mocked was building something that would one day stand directly in his path. And this time, Sam Adebayo would not be invisible. He would be inevitable. For a while, Sam allowed himself to believe he was safe. Not safe in life, but safe in one place. The library had become more than shelter. It had become control. Out there, on the streets, everything could be taken from him. Food, sleep, dignity. But inside those walls, He had something no one could interrupt. Progress. And progress gave him something dangerous. Hope. Every night, Sam returned to the same desk, the same chair, the same glowing screen. His movements became sharper, faster, more certain. He wasn't guessing anymore. He was building. His system had grown far beyond what it started as. What began as a simple tool for tracking inventory had now evolved into something much larger, a connected ecosystem. He had designed it to think, to adapt, to learn patterns from usage. If a store sold out of a product too quickly, the system would suggest restocking levels. If customers stopped returning, it would flag behavior changes. If payments slowed down, it would identify risk patterns. Sam leaned back one night, staring at the screen. For the first time, he allowed himself to think it. This could change things. Not just for him. For thousands of people like the ones he grew up around. Walter noticed the shift immediately. "You're smiling," he said quietly. Sam didn't realize it. But he was. "I think it's working," Sam replied. Walter stepped closer. "Show me." And Sam did. He walked him through everything. The structure, the intelligence, the flow. Walter didn't interrupt, didn't nod, didn't react. He just watched. When Sam finished, there was a long silence. Then Walter said something unexpected. "It's good." Sam blinked. "That's it." Walter's expression didn't change. "It's very good," he added. Sam let out a small breath. But Walter wasn't done. "It's also vulnerable." That word landed heavier. Sam frowned. "How?" Walter pointed at the notebook on the table. "Because it's all there." Sam looked down at the pages. Months of work. Carefully written. Structured. Clear. "It helps me think," Sam said. Walter nodded. "I know." Then he leaned closer. "And it will help someone else if they find it." Sam's chest tightened slightly. "No one comes here," he said. Walter didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked around the library. Then back at Sam. "You're not invisible here," he said quietly. That stayed with Sam longer than he expected. That night, for the first time, Sam hesitated before leaving. He closed his notebook slowly, looked at it, then at his bag. He considered taking it with him. But the thought of carrying it outside, through cold, through risk, through everything, felt worse. So he did what he had always done. He slid it under the desk. Out of sight. Or so he thought. The next evening felt different. Sam noticed it immediately. It wasn't something he could see. It was something he felt. The air inside the library was the same. The silence was the same. Walter's routine was the same. But something was off. As he walked toward his usual desk, his eyes scanned the room more carefully than usual. And then he saw him. A man sitting 2 rows away. Young. Confident. Well-dressed. Too well-dressed for this part of town. Too comfortable for someone just browsing. The man wasn't reading. Wasn't typing. He was watching. Not directly. But enough. Sam slowed his steps. Just slightly. The man glanced up. For a brief second. Their eyes met. Then the man smiled. Not friendly. Not hostile. Just aware. Sam looked away. Sat down. Turned on the computer. But he couldn't focus. Every few seconds, he felt it. That presence. That attention. After a few minutes, he stood up. Walked toward a different shelf. Pretended to browse. And from that angle, he saw it clearly. The man's gaze wasn't random. It was fixed. On his desk. On his notebook. Sam's stomach tightened. He returned to his seat slowly. Closed the notebook casually. Slipped it into his bag. The man didn't react. But Sam saw it. That slight shift in posture. That almost invisible acknowledgement. And suddenly, Walter's words came back. "You're not invisible here." That night, Sam didn't stay long. For the first time, he left early. The next night, he returned. Careful. Alert. He waited outside longer than usual. Watched the windows. Watched the door. Nothing. So he went in. Everything looked normal. Empty. Quiet. Safe. He sat down. Opened his bag. Pulled out the notebook. And froze. Something was wrong. Not gone. Not stolen. But moved. The pages weren't where he left them. Small details. Subtle. But enough. Someone had touched it. Sam's breathing slowed. Controlled. He didn't panic. Not anymore. He just sat there. Thinking. Watching. Then, slowly, he closed the notebook. That was the moment. The moment something inside him changed. Not fear. Not anger. Clarity. Across the city. In a quiet office filled with glass walls and polished surfaces. Preston Hale leaned back in his chair. Across from him sat two men in suits. Investors. And this is different how? One of them asked. Preston smiled slightly. It's simple, he said. He clicked the remote. A system appeared on the screen. Familiar. Too familiar. Most systems are built for large businesses, Preston continued. This one is built for everyone else. The men leaned forward. Interested. Preston spoke smoothly, confidently, as if every word was his. Back in the library, Sam didn't open his notebook again that night. He just sat there, still, processing. Then Walter approached. You feel it, don't you? He asked. Sam didn't look up. Yes. Walter nodded slowly. Good. Sam frowned slightly. Good. Walter leaned forward. Because now you understand. Sam looked at him. They're watching. Walter didn't deny it. He just said, they always were. Silence. Sam's jaw tightened. What do I do? He asked. Walter's answer came without hesitation. You get better. That was it. No sympathy. No comfort. Just truth. The next night, Sam didn't bring his notebook. Instead, he brought something else. His mind. He sat at the computer, opened a blank screen, and began again. Not copying. Not recreating. Rebuilding. Better. Stronger. Smarter. Because now, he wasn't building for survival. He was building for war. And somewhere in Birmingham, a company was being born on something that was never truly theirs. But they didn't know it yet. They hadn't stolen his future. They had only stolen his first draft. And the version Sam Adebayo was about to create next would be the one that changed everything. After the notebook incident, Sam stopped trusting the quiet. Before that, silence had felt protective. Now it felt like camouflage. The library was still warm. The computers still worked. Walter still moved through the building with the same steady routine, pushing carts, emptying bins, wiping tables no one cared enough to notice. But something had shifted in Sam. He no longer entered the building like a grateful boy receiving mercy. He entered like someone learning the rules of a dangerous world. And the first rule, he now understood, was simple. If something had value, someone would come for it. Not because they needed it more. Not because they built it better. But because they could. That truth settled into him slowly over the next few nights, hardening in places where hope used to sit. He still worked. Still learned. Still built. But now his focus had changed. Before, he was trying to prove something to himself. Now, he was preparing for people he could not yet see. Walter noticed that immediately. Sam spoke less. He explained less. He wrote less on paper. He kept more in his head. One night, after nearly an hour of working in silence, Walter rolled his cleaning cart past Sam's desk, stopped, then backed it up a little. You're angry, he said. Sam didn't look away from the screen. No, he replied. Walter gave a small grunt. You are. You're just being disciplined about it. Sam's fingers paused over the keyboard. That irritated him. The way Walter could say the thing he was trying hardest not to show. He leaned back in the chair and finally looked up. Maybe I should be angry. Walter nodded once. Maybe. Sam studied him for a moment. The fluorescent light overhead reflected faintly off the metal handle of Walter's mop bucket. His uniform was clean but worn. His shoes looked older than some of the library books. Nothing about him suggested importance. Nothing about him suggested history. And yet everything he said landed like it came from experience, not opinion. Sam had noticed that from the beginning. Walter never guessed. He remembered. That night, Sam decided to ask the question more directly than he ever had before. Who are you, really? Walter kept one hand on the cart handle. A janitor. You know that's not what I mean. Walter looked at him, then glanced around the empty room as if checking whether the building itself was listening. After a few seconds, he parked the cart beside a nearby shelf and pulled out a chair. He sat down with a slow heaviness that made him look older than usual. For a brief moment, he didn't speak. Then he said, "You ever notice how people stop seeing certain men after a while?" Sam frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Walter said, "when people see a uniform, they stop asking questions. They decide they already know the story." He looked down at his hands. These hands used to sign contracts worth more money than this whole block has seen in 10 years. Sam said nothing. Walter continued, "I used to be in systems design, infrastructure, payment architecture, network logic. Back when businesses were still trying to understand what digital scale would really mean." He gave a small dry laugh. "A lot of important men smiled at me back then. A lot of them liked to say they respected my mind." Sam leaned forward a little. "What happened?" Walter's expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. The room seemed to quiet around him. "I trusted the wrong partnership," he said. That was all. Sam waited. Walter looked at him, saw that he was still waiting, and exhaled slowly through his nose. "You want the long version?" he asked. Sam nodded. Walter looked toward the far end of the library where darkness pressed softly against the windows. When he began again, his voice was calm, but there was something buried underneath it, something old and heavy. "I built a transaction routing model years ago," he said. "Something efficient, adaptive, ahead of its time. It solved a cost problem nobody else had solved properly yet. I was younger then. Smarter in some ways, dumber in others. I had a small team, a few early believers, and one partner with the kind of face that makes banks comfortable." Sam didn't interrupt. "We grew quickly," Walter said. "Too quickly. Started attracting attention. Investors, bigger players, people who smiled with all their teeth and shook your hand a second too long. The usual kind." His mouth tightened faintly. "My partner handled the people side. I handled the system. That was the arrangement. At least that's what I thought." Sam already knew where this was going. Not the details, but the shape of it. "They pushed me out," Walter said. "Legally, cleanly, efficiently. Documents revised. Ownership diluted. Meetings scheduled without me. Decisions made before I entered the room. By the time I understood what was happening, they had already turned my work into a company that no longer had my name on it." Sam felt a cold anger rise in him. "What did you do?" Walter's eyes stayed on the floor for a second before lifting again. "I fought," he said. "At first. And I learned something ugly." He gave a humorless smile. "A man can be right and still lose. Especially if the people stealing from him wear better suits and tell the story first." Silence sat between them. Sam looked down at his own hands. He thought about the notebook, the way it had felt to sense someone touching what belonged to him, the violation of it. Then he thought of Walter, not losing a notebook, but an entire future. "Did you ever get it back?" Sam asked quietly. Walter shook his head. "No." That single word hung in the air. Not dramatic. Not bitter. Worse than both. Final. Sam swallowed. "So why help me?" Walter looked at him with a kind of tired patience. Because nobody helped me at the point where help would have mattered most. He leaned forward slightly. And because I know what you were standing on. Sam frowned. What do you mean? Walter gestured toward the computer, the notebook-less desk, the whole hidden world Sam had created inside the library. You think this is about code, he said. It isn't. Code is just the visible part. What matters is the way you see systems. The way you simplify what other people complicate. The way you think from the edge inward instead of from the center outward. Sam stared at him. Nobody had ever described his mind back to him like that. Not his teachers back home. Not anyone in Birmingham. Certainly not anyone who mattered. Walter saw the effect and nodded to himself. Yes, he said quietly. That look on your face. That's what happens when someone tells you the truth about yourself before the world does. Sam looked away. Part of him wanted to absorb the words. Another part wanted to reject them because believing them would make him vulnerable. It would make hope feel real again. And real hope was dangerous. Walter seemed to understand that too. He stood slowly, then walked to the cart and pulled a folded cloth from the top shelf. You're thinking about revenge the wrong way, he said, wiping down a nearby table. Sam turned back toward him. I didn't say revenge. No, Walter replied. You didn't have to. Sam sat in silence. Walter continued cleaning as he spoke. You're thinking like a hurt person. That's natural. But hurt people want witnesses. Strategists want outcomes. Sam let that sit, then asked, what's the difference? Walter stopped wiping and looked at him. A hurt person wants the one who wronged him to feel pain. He set the cloth down. A strategist wants to build something so undeniable that the people who wronged him become irrelevant, and then, if necessary, expose them from a position where no one can protect them. Sam's chest tightened. That was not how he had been thinking. He had been thinking about proving something. About one day standing in front of people like Preston Hale and making them see what they failed to see. But Walter was talking about something colder. More effective. Power first. Exposure second. It changed the order of everything. What if I want both? Sam asked. Walter's mouth twitched almost into a smile. Then you build first. That night, Walter didn't leave him with more philosophy. He left him with work. He disappeared into a back room and came back carrying a worn banker's box, the kind used for old files and forgotten records. He placed it gently on the desk beside Sam. Dust lifted from the lid. What's this? Sam asked. Walter opened the box. Inside were papers, old schematics, printouts, diagrams, legal pads filled with notes and dense, sharp handwriting. Sam's eyes widened. Walter rested one hand on the edge of the box. This, he said, is what I kept. Sam looked up at him. From your old company? Walter nodded. Not enough to recover what was taken. Enough to remember how I built. Sam reached carefully into the box and lifted a stack of documents. The pages were aged, some corners curled, but the ideas inside them felt alive. Routing logic, failure contingencies, transaction prioritization models, scaled infrastructure maps. Even where the technology had aged, the thinking underneath it had not. This is incredible, Sam said. Walter gave a small shrug. It was useful once. It still is. Walter studied him for a moment. Yes, he said. That's why I'm showing it to you. Sam looked back down at the box. The weight of the moment pressed into him harder than he expected. This wasn't just information. It was inheritance. Not of money. Not of status. Of unfinished thought. He looked up again. Why now? Walter's answer came simply. Because now you understand what theft really costs. For the next several weeks, the library changed again. Not physically, but intellectually. Walter stopped being only the man who let Sam in. He became a teacher in the truest sense, not by simplifying things, but by raising the level Sam had to reach. They argued over architecture, debated trade-offs, tested assumptions. Walter would ask questions that forced Sam to defend every decision. Why this route instead of that one? What happens under load? What's your point of failure? What is the user actually paying for? Function, speed, confidence, or survival? Sometimes Sam had answers. Sometimes he didn't. When he didn't, Walter never filled in the gap immediately. He let Sam sit with it. He made him wrestle the answer into existence. At first, that frustrated him. Later, he understood why. Answers you inherit can be forgotten. Answers you earn become part of your structure. One night, long after midnight, Sam stood near a whiteboard Walter had quietly rolled out from a storage room. It was scratched and old, but usable. He had drawn 3 versions of a system model side by side. Walter stood across from him, arms folded. "Which one survives contact with reality?" he asked. Sam pointed to the middle. Walter shook his head. "No." Sam frowned. "Why?" Walter stepped closer and tapped the bottom corner of the diagram. "Because this assumes stable behavior from unstable users." Sam stared at it, then saw it. A flaw, not in code, in human behavior. His shoulders dropped with reluctant understanding. Walter nodded once. "Good." Again. Sam erased half the model and started over. That became their rhythm. Build, test, break, rebuild, over and over. And through that process, Sam changed. The boy who had once felt grateful just to be allowed into the building was disappearing. In his place, something sharper was forming. Not arrogant, not loud, but deeply certain. The certainty didn't come from praise. It came from competence. He was no longer merely talented. He was becoming dangerous. Not because he hated people, because he was learning how value really worked. How systems became companies. How companies became power. How power protected itself. And how the only thing more threatening than money was clarity. One night, after a particularly long session, Sam rubbed his eyes and leaned back hard in the chair. "I still think about them," he admitted. Walter, sorting papers back into the box, didn't ask who. He knew. "Preston," Sam said. "People like him." Walter slid the last file into place and closed the lid. "Of course you do." "I keep thinking." Sam stopped, searching for the words. "I keep thinking that one day I want them to know." Walter rested both palms on the box. "Know what?" Sam's voice was low now, but steady. "That they were wrong." Walter looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "They will know when your name costs them something." Sam went quiet. That was the line. That was the standard. Not applause. Not personal closure. Consequence. Walter picked up the box and carried it back toward the storage room. Before disappearing into the back, he paused and looked over his shoulder. "There's one more thing you need to understand," he said. Sam waited. Walter's face was unreadable. "When people steal from you the first time, it is partly because they think you are powerless." He held Sam's gaze. "If they ever get another chance, it will be because you stayed sentimental." Then he disappeared into the dark hall. Sam sat alone with those words. Stayed sentimental. He repeated the phrase in his mind until it began to change shape. He thought about the notebook, about school, about hunger, about being laughed at, dismissed, overlooked. He thought about how badly he still wanted a clean emotional ending, the kind where someone apologizes and the damage is acknowledged and the world restores balance because it ought to. Then he understood. Walter had lived long enough to know the truth. The world did not restore balance. People built it. Slowly, deliberately, at cost. That night, Sam opened a new document on the computer and wrote a title across the top. Version 2. He stared at the words for a long moment. Then beneath them, he wrote something else. No paper, no loose notes, no unfinished leverage. It became his rule. From that point on, Sam changed the way he worked entirely. He memorized core structures. He fragmented sensitive logic. He stored critical layers separately. He began thinking not just like a founder, but like someone operating in hostile territory. And in a way, he was. Because somewhere out there, people with easier lives, cleaner clothes, and inherited confidence were already learning how to package stolen brilliance as innovation. He did not know exactly who had seen his notebook. He did not know exactly how far the damage had gone. But he knew enough. Enough to stop being naive. Enough to start becoming formidable. By the time dawn began to lighten the windows that morning, Sam had built almost nothing visible. No finished module. No polished interface. No final product. But something much more important had happened. He had crossed a line. Before, he was a gifted boy with pain, hunger, and ideas. Now, he was becoming a man with method. And method, Walter knew, was what turned wounded people into forces history had to reckon with. As the first pale light crept across the library floor, Sam finally shut down the computer and stood up. His back ached. His eyes burned. But his mind felt unusually clear. Walter was near the side door, rinsing out a mop bucket. Sam walked toward him, then stopped. Walter looked up. Sam held his gaze. "You said they can't copy how I think," he said. Walter nodded. "That's right." Sam's voice was calm now. "Different. Then I'll make sure that's the part they need most." Walter watched him for a second longer, then gave the smallest nod. Now, at last, he seemed satisfied. Sam stepped out into the cold Birmingham morning with no home, no money, and no public identity anyone would have envied. But for the first time since arriving in America, he was carrying something no one around him could see. Not hope, not revenge, not yet. Strategy. And years later, when powerful men would stand under bright lights pretending they understood innovation, none of them would realize that the real turning point had happened in silence. In a nearly forgotten library, between a homeless boy and an old man holding a floor mop, on the night that talent stopped being innocent. Disappearing is easier than people think. You don't need to run. You don't need to hide. You just need to stop being relevant to the people who once defined you. Sam Adebayo didn't vanish in a single moment. He faded, gradually, quietly, completely. At Jackson Hale High School, his name was still on the roster for a few weeks after he stopped showing up. Teachers marked him absent, then irregular, then withdrawn. No one followed up. No one asked questions beyond what was required. In the cafeteria, his seat, if it could even be called his, was taken by someone else within days. The locker that once held his books was cleared out. The small piece of tape with his name on it was peeled off and replaced. To most people, he had never really been there. Preston Hale noticed his absence once. Only once. It happened during lunch. One of his friends asked casually, "Yo, what happened to that African kid?" Preston didn't look up from his phone. "Which one?" "The one you used to mess with." "The quiet one." Preston shrugged. "Probably went back to wherever he came from." Laughter followed. The conversation moved on. And just like that, Sam was erased. But outside that world, Sam was building something that could not be erased. Time changed him, not in one dramatic leap, but in thousands of small, disciplined decisions. He stopped measuring life in days. He measured it in iterations. Version 2 became version 3. Version 3 became version 4. Every version faster, smarter, more resilient. He no longer needed the notebook. Everything lived in his head, structured, layered, protected. Walter watched this transformation with a quiet satisfaction he never voiced directly. "You don't repeat mistakes," Walter said one night. Sam didn't look up. "I can't afford to." Walter nodded. "That's one way to learn." Another night, after Sam had spent hours redesigning a payment flow system, Walter asked, "What happens when someone bigger notices this?" Sam answered without hesitation, "They will." And then Sam paused, not because he didn't know, but because the answer mattered. "They won't understand it fast enough," he said. Walter smiled slightly. That was the difference now. Sam wasn't reacting anymore. He was anticipating. The first real breakthrough came quietly. A small convenience store owner named Mr. Alvarez. Sam met him by accident. It was late afternoon. Sam was sitting near the back of the store, charging his phone from an outlet near a soda machine. He had learned which places tolerated his presence and which didn't. Mr. Alvarez's store tolerated. The man was frustrated. Sam could hear it in his voice as he argued with someone over the phone. "No, I told you already. I don't know what's missing. The numbers don't match. I'm losing money every week." Sam listened, not intentionally, but closely. When the call ended, Mr. Alvarez slammed the phone down and muttered under his breath. Sam hesitated, then stood up. "Excuse me," he said carefully. The man looked at him, tired and slightly annoyed. "What?" Sam chose his words carefully. "You're losing inventory because you don't track patterns," he said. The man frowned. "What are you talking about?" Sam pointed toward the shelves. "You restock based on habit, not data. And you don't track what sells at what time." Mr. Alvarez stared at him. Suspicious. "You work here?" he asked. Sam shook his head. "No." "Then how do you know?" Sam hesitated, then said, "I built something." The man crossed his arms. "What kind of something?" Sam stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. "A system," he said. "Simple. I can show you." There was a long pause. Mr. Alvarez looked at him. Really looked at him. Not the way people usually did. Not dismissive. Not mocking. Assessing. Finally, he said, "You've got 5 minutes." That was all Sam needed. He pulled out his phone, opened a stripped-down version of his system, and showed him. Not everything. Just enough. Inventory tracking. Pattern recognition. Simple alerts. Mr. Alvarez leaned in. 5 minutes turned into 20. Then silence. Then one sentence. "How much?" Sam froze. It was the first time anyone had asked that question. He hadn't thought about pricing. Hadn't thought about business. Only function. "Whatever you can pay," Sam said finally. Mr. Alvarez nodded slowly. "Come tomorrow," he said. "We try it." That night in the library, Sam didn't start coding immediately. He sat still, thinking. Walter noticed. "You sold something," he said. Sam looked up. "How did you know?" Walter shrugged. "You look different." Sam exhaled slowly. "He said he'll try it tomorrow." Walter nodded. "And?" Sam hesitated. "What if it fails?" Walter didn't respond right away. Then he said, "Good." Sam frowned. "Good." Walter leaned forward. "Because failure in private teaches you faster than success in public." That calmed something in Sam. The next day, it worked. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to reduce loss. Enough to create clarity. Enough to matter. Mr. Alvarez paid him. Not much, but real. The first money Sam earned in America. Not from survival. From value. That changed everything. Word spread. Slowly. Quietly. One store. Then another. No marketing. No branding. Just results. Sam refined the system with each user. Learning. Adapting. Improving. And with every improvement, the gap widened. Between him and the version of his idea that had been stolen. Meanwhile, Preston Hale stood on stages, talking about innovation, receiving applause, building a reputation. But something was wrong. His system didn't grow, didn't evolve, because it couldn't, because he didn't understand it. Back in the shadows, Sam did. Months turned into years. Sam moved, not randomly, strategically, different cities, different markets, expanding quietly, never attaching his name, never stepping into the spotlight, because Walter had taught him something critical. Visibility without control is exposure. So Sam built first and stayed unseen. One night, standing outside the library, Sam looked at Walter. "I think it's ready," he said. Walter studied him. "For what?" he asked. Sam's answer was calm. "For them to notice." Walter nodded slowly. "They will," he said, then added, "and when they do, make sure you're already untouchable." Sam looked up at the building, at the place where everything began. And for the first time, he wasn't thinking about survival. He wasn't thinking about proving anything. He was thinking about timing. Because somewhere out there, people were still building on something that didn't belong to them. And they still believed. No one was coming. But Sam Adebayo wasn't coming back as the boy they ignored. He was coming back as something they could not control. And when that moment arrived, it wouldn't feel like revenge. It would feel like truth. Finally catching up. Power doesn't announce itself at first. It accumulates. Quietly. System by system. Decision by decision. Until one day, it becomes impossible to ignore. By the time Sam Adebayo turned 27, his company existed in places he had never physically been. Small shops in Texas. Corner stores in Atlanta, family businesses in Detroit, warehouse distributors in Arizona. They all used the same system. Not because they were told to, but because it worked. Sam never advertised, never pitched, never introduced himself. He let results travel for him. A store would stabilize, then grow, then recommend the system to another. And just like that, the network expanded. Not fast enough to attract noise, but fast enough to build something real. Sam watched everything. Every transaction. Every pattern. Every failure. Every improvement. He didn't just run the system. He lived inside it. His days were no longer defined by hunger or survival. But they were not easy either. Success had replaced one kind of pressure with another. Scale. And scale had its own dangers. One wrong assumption could affect thousands. One flaw could spread faster than he could contain it. So Sam did what he had always done. He stayed disciplined. No shortcuts. No unnecessary exposure. No ego. Walter remained close. Not physically every day, but always present in influence. Even now, years later, Sam still heard his voice in decisions. Don't build for applause. Build for durability. And Sam did. But the world was starting to notice. At first, it was subtle. A blog post. Underground system disrupting small business tech market. Then an article. Unknown platform quietly outperforming established giants. Then something bigger. Investors started asking questions. Who built this? Where did it come from? Why wasn't there a founder? But there were no answers. Because Sam had made sure of that. Every layer of his company was structured to protect him. No direct ownership tied to his public identity. No interviews. No face. Just performance. And performance speaks louder than marketing ever will. Meanwhile, in Birmingham, Preston Hale's world was beginning to crack. At first, it was small. Client complaints. System is slow. Doesn't adapt. Too rigid. Then bigger. Competitors outperforming them. But not just any competitors. A specific one. One system. Always the same one. Preston sat in his office late one evening, staring at the report in front of him. Loss percentages. Market shifts. Client migrations. All pointing in one direction. He tapped his pen against the desk slowly. "Who is this?" he muttered. Across from him, His operations manager shifted uncomfortably. "We don't know," the man said. "There's no clear ownership structure. No public leadership. It's unusual." Preston didn't like unusual. Unusual meant unpredictable, and unpredictable meant dangerous. "Find out," he said. The man nodded. But the truth was, there was nothing obvious to find, because Sam had built his company the way Walter had taught him. Layered, protected, unexposed. Back in Sam's world, things were moving toward something inevitable. He could feel it, not in data, but in tension, the kind of tension that builds before a shift. One night, sitting in a quiet office far from Birmingham, Sam watched a live industry panel. Preston Hale was on stage, confident, polished, talking about innovation. Sam watched in silence, not angry, not emotional, observing. Preston spoke about systems, about scalability, about understanding the needs of small businesses. Sam leaned back slightly. There was a time those words would have triggered something in him. Now, they didn't, because he understood something Preston didn't. Words don't build systems. Understanding does. And Preston had never truly understood. Walter walked into the room quietly. "You're watching him again," he said. Sam didn't look away. "He's still talking," Sam replied. Walter stood beside him, watched for a moment, then said, "He doesn't know." Sam nodded once. "No," he said. "He doesn't." Walter folded his arms. "And when he finds out?" Sam finally turned off the screen. The room fell silent. "That depends," Sam said. "On what?" Sam stood up slowly. "On how we decide to introduce ourselves." That was the first time Sam said it out loud. Introduce. Not confront. Not attack. Introduce. Because what he was planning was not just exposure. It was positioning. A few weeks later, an invitation arrived. Global Business Summit. Birmingham, Alabama. High profile. High visibility. Industry leaders. Investors. Media. And one special feature. A keynote reveal. The founder of the fastest growing business system in the world will appear publicly for the first time. Sam stared at the email for a long moment. Birmingham. The word alone carried weight. Memory. Pain. History. Walter noticed immediately. "You don't have to go," he said. Sam shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I do." Walter studied him. "This isn't about them anymore," he said. Sam met his gaze. "I know. Then why go back?" Sam's answer was quiet. "Because they're still standing on something that isn't theirs." Silence. Walter nodded slowly. "Then go," he said. Preparation didn't look like revenge. It looked like precision. Sam reviewed everything. Data. Timelines. Proof. Every piece of his original system. Every evolution. Every timestamp. Not emotion. Evidence. Because when truth comes out, it needs to be undeniable. Meanwhile, Preston Hale received his own invitation. Keynote speaker. Front stage. Recognition. Validation. Everything he believed he had earned. The stage was set, but not the way he thought. The day of the summit arrived. Birmingham looked different. Cleaned up. Prepared. Polished. But beneath it, the same city remained. Sam arrived quietly. No entourage. No announcement. Just presence. Backstage, the energy was controlled chaos. Assistants moving. Speakers preparing. Voices overlapping. Sam stood apart. Still. Focused. Not nervous. Certain. Walter stood beside him. Older now. Slower. But steady. "You ready?" he asked. Sam adjusted his cuffs slightly. "Yes." Walter looked at him carefully. "For what?" he asked. Sam's answer was simple. For the truth to cost something. Out on the stage, Preston Hale adjusted his tie, took a breath, and walked into the spotlight. Confident. Unaware. And for the first time in years, Sam Adebayo was no longer building in the shadows. He was about to step into the light. And when he did, everything would change. The room felt different the moment Preston Hale stepped onto the stage. Not because of what anyone could see, but because of what was about to happen. The lights were bright. The audience was full. Rows of polished faces, tailored suits, and quiet ambition filled the hall. Investors, founders, media, people who understood power, or at least believed they did. Preston adjusted his jacket as he approached the center of the stage. He looked exactly how success was supposed to look. Confident, controlled, admired. And that, he said, finishing his final point, is how innovation changes the world, not by following trends, but by understanding real problems and solving them at scale. Applause followed. Strong, respectful, expected. Preston smiled. Not too wide, not arrogant, just enough. He stepped back slightly, acknowledging the crowd. This was his world. These were his people. And for a brief moment, everything felt exactly the way it was supposed to. Then the host walked back on stage. "Thank you, Preston," she said warmly. "Incredible insights, as always." Preston nodded, calm, relaxed. "And now," she continued, her tone shifting just slightly, "we move to the moment many of you have been waiting for." The energy in the room changed. Subtle, but undeniable. The founder of the fastest growing system in the world. A pause. A company that has quietly outperformed every major player in the market. Another pause. Will be revealing himself publicly for the very first time. The audience leaned forward. Phones lifted slightly. Whispers moved through the room. Preston's expression remained neutral. But inside, something tightened. Because for weeks now, he had been hearing about this company, this system, this threat, and no matter how much he had tried to investigate it, there was nothing. No face, no name, no origin, just results. And now, whoever was behind it was about to walk onto the same stage. The host turned slightly toward the side entrance. "Ladies and gentlemen," a final pause. "Please welcome." Silence. Sam Adebayo. The name meant nothing to most of the room. At first, Preston's brow furrowed slightly. Adebayo. Something about it felt familiar. Then, a figure stepped onto the stage. Slow, controlled, unhurried. Sam Adebayo. Not the boy from the cafeteria. Not the quiet kid with the accent. Not the one who stood frozen under laughter. This was someone else entirely. His posture was calm. His presence steady. His expression unreadable. He didn't rush to the microphone. Didn't acknowledge the audience immediately. He let the silence stretch. Because silence, when controlled, is power. Preston felt it. That discomfort. That subtle shift. Then Sam stepped forward, placed one hand lightly on the podium, and spoke. "Good evening." His voice was calm, clear, controlled. No hesitation, no weakness. And that was the first thing that unsettled Preston, because he remembered something different, something smaller, something easier to dismiss. Sam looked out at the audience. Then, slowly, his gaze moved, until it landed on Preston, and stayed there, for just a moment longer than necessary. Then he continued. "Some of you know me." A pause. Just not like this. A ripple of confusion moved through the room. Preston's chest tightened. Then the screen behind Sam lit up. Not with graphs, not with company data, but with something else. A classroom. A grainy image. Students laughing. A slide projected on a wall. From the jungle to Java. The room shifted instantly. Confusion turned into discomfort. Some people leaned forward. Others glanced around, trying to understand. Preston's heart rate increased. He recognized it. Not immediately, but enough. A memory. Buried. dismissed. Now, pulled back into the light. Sam didn't rush. He let the image sit, let people absorb it. Then he spoke again. I came to this city with nothing, he said. His voice didn't rise, didn't shake. I was 17. Another image appeared. A notebook page. Handwritten. Diagrams. Systems. Structures. Dated. Time-stamped. Years before Preston's company launch. The room grew quieter. Not confused anymore. Understanding. Slow. Heavy. Preston's mouth went dry. Sam continued. I built something. Pause. Not because I wanted recognition. Another pause. But because I understood a problem no one else cared about. He turned slightly. Not fully toward Preston. But enough. Someone saw it. Silence. Someone took it. The words landed without force, but with precision, like a blade placed exactly where it needed to be. Preston's hands tightened at his sides. The audience was no longer passive. They were watching. Closely. Sam stepped away from the podium, moved slowly across the stage. I didn't come here to argue, he said. I didn't come here for sympathy. He stopped. I came here to finish something. The screen changed again. Now, two systems side by side. One labeled Original Architecture, Sam Adebayo. The other, Hail Systems, Initial Launch Version. Identical structures. Not similar. Identical. The room reacted. Not loudly, but enough. Enough to break the illusion. Sam turned fully now, facing Preston directly. You built your reputation on something you didn't understand. Preston opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Sam continued. You copied the surface. Step closer. But you never understood the depth. Another screen shift. Now, Sam's current system. Advanced. Layered. Adaptive. Miles ahead. I did. Silence. Then, the final line. Delivered without emotion. My company acquired yours 3 months ago. The room froze. Not metaphorically. Physically. No movement. No sound. Preston stood still. Processing. Failing to process. Because everything he believed, everything he built his identity on, was collapsing in real time. Sam didn't raise his voice. Didn't press further. He didn't need to. The truth had already done the work. He stepped back, returned to the podium, and said one final thing. Some stories end with applause. Pause. This one ends with truth. Then he walked away. No bow. No acknowledgement. Just exit. Leaving behind silence so heavy. It felt like consequence. And in that silence, for the first time, no one laughed. Silence has a weight. And that day, it crushed everything. For several seconds after Sam Adebayo walked off the stage, no one moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. The kind of silence that filled the room wasn't confusion anymore. It was realization. Because truth, when it arrives without warning, doesn't explode. It settles. Heavy. Final. Undeniable. Preston Hale was still standing exactly where Sam had left him. In the spotlight. But something had changed. Moments ago, that light had meant admiration, recognition, power. Now, it exposed him. Every eye in the room was on him. Not with respect, not with curiosity, but with something colder. Understanding. The host stepped forward slowly, clearly unprepared for what had just unfolded. She opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. Because there was nothing she could say that would fix what had just happened. The room began to stir. Whispers. Phones. Movement. People weren't just reacting. They were recalculating. Reputations. Investments. Associations. And Preston was now a liability. By the time the event ended, the story had already escaped the room. Clips spread online within minutes. The classroom footage. The notebook, the side-by-side system comparison, and most of all, Sam's voice. Calm. Certain. Unshaken. Headlines followed within hours. Billionaire founder exposes stolen tech live on stage. From homeless teen to industry leader, the truth behind Hale Systems. The fall of a rising star. Preston Hale's reputation in question. The narrative shifted fast. Faster than Preston could respond. Because he didn't control the story anymore. Truth did. The following days were brutal. Not physically, but socially, professionally, publicly. Preston stopped appearing in meetings. Calls went unanswered. Emails ignored. His company's board issued a statement. Carefully worded. Neutral in tone, but clear in direction. They were reviewing internal structures. Which meant one thing. Distance. Legal teams got involved. Investors withdrew quietly. Partners reassessed. Everything that had once been solid began to dissolve. Not because Sam attacked him further, but because Sam didn't need to. The exposure had done enough. Because when truth becomes public, it doesn't need help. Meanwhile, Sam did nothing. No interviews. No statements. No follow-up. He didn't explain himself. Didn't defend himself. Didn't celebrate. Because this had never been about attention. It had been about correction. And correction had already happened. A week later, Sam returned to Birmingham. Not for business. Not for recognition. But for something quieter. The library. It hadn't changed. Same walls. Same doors. Same silence. But to Sam, it felt different. Because he had changed. He stepped through the same side entrance. This time, not hiding, just walking. Walter was inside. Older, slower, but still moving with the same quiet purpose. He looked up as Sam entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Walter nodded. You came back. Sam smiled slightly. I said I would. Walter leaned the mop against the wall. So, he said, how does it feel? Sam looked around the room. At the desk, where everything began. At the computers. At the space that had held his lowest and highest moments. Then he answered. Quiet. Walter studied him. Not satisfying? He asked. Sam thought about it. The stage. The silence. Preston's face. Then he shook his head. It's not what I thought it would be. Walter nodded slowly. It never is. They stood there for a while. Not talking. Not needing to. Because some moments don't need words. After a while, Walter spoke again. You did it right. Sam looked at him. What does that mean? Walter met his gaze. You didn't chase revenge, he said. You built something that made revenge unnecessary. That landed. Because it was true. Sam hadn't destroyed Preston. Preston had collapsed under truth. And there was a difference. Sam walked toward the desk. Ran his hand lightly over the surface. This is where everything changed, he said. Walter smiled faintly. No, he replied. Sam looked back. Walter tapped his chest lightly. This is where everything changed. Sam stood still, then nodded. Because he understood now. It hadn't been the library, not the system, not even the opportunity. It had been the moment he stopped thinking like someone waiting to be saved and started thinking like someone who would build his own way out. As Sam stepped outside, the Birmingham air felt different. Not warmer, not kinder, just smaller, because he was no longer contained by it. Across the city, people still talked. About the summit. About the exposure. About what it meant. Some felt uncomfortable. Some felt justified. Some felt late. Because the truth had been there. They had just chosen not to see it. And somewhere, Preston Hale sat alone. Not in a boardroom. Not on a stage. Just a man. Finally understanding something he should have understood years ago. That taking something you didn't earn doesn't make it yours. It just delays the moment it's taken back. As for Sam Adebayo, he didn't look back. Not because he had forgotten, but because he no longer needed to. And if anyone ever asked him what changed his life, he would not mention the stage, or the money, or the company. He would think of a quiet night, a closed library, and an old man holding a key. Because sometimes, the difference between being broken and becoming unstoppable is one person who sees you clearly, before the world does. And the boy they once ignored, he didn't just rise. He rewrote the ending. The end. And that is how Sam Adebayo turned pain into power, silence into success, and truth into justice. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because the next story might change your perspective even more.